500 years ago, a man sat in a cold room outside Florence and wrote the most dangerous book in history. He had been tortured. He had been exiled. He had lost everything: his position, his reputation, his freedom. And from that ruin, he wrote a book so honest about power that it got him condemned by the church and banned across Europe. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. The book was called The Prince, and almost everything you think you know about it is wrong. Machiavelli did not write The Prince because he was evil. He wrote it because he had seen what evil looks like when it wears a crown and calls itself virtue. For 14 years, he served the Republic of Florence as a senior diplomat. He negotiated with kings. He watched popes lie. He stood in rooms with men who smiled while signing death warrants. He saw Cesare Borgia, a man who murdered his own brother, seduced his own sister according to rumor, and conquered half of Italy through a combination of charm, violence, and betrayal. And he studied him, not because he admired him, because he wanted to understand how power actually works, stripped of every comfortable illusion. When the Medici family seized Florence in 1512, Machiavelli was arrested, tortured on the strappado, his arms wrenched behind his back and his body suspended by the wrists, and then exiled to a small farm outside the city. There, sitting in a cold farmhouse with ink-stained hands and nothing left to lose, he wrote the truth. The Prince is not a manual for tyrants. It is a manual for survival. Machiavelli's central argument is brutally simple. The world does not care about your intentions. It cares about your results. A leader who is kind but incompetent will destroy more lives than a leader who is ruthless but effective. A prince who keeps every promise will be exploited by every prince who does not. This was revolutionary. For 1,000 years, every political text described how rulers should behave according to Christian virtue. Be generous, be merciful, be honest, be just. Plato described philosopher kings. Augustine described the city of God. Aquinas described the natural law. Every one of them described a world that did not exist and never had. Machiavelli looked at history and asked a different question. What do successful rulers actually do? The answer was uncomfortable. They lie when necessary. They punish swiftly and forgive slowly. They would rather be feared than loved, because fear is reliable and love is not. They study their enemies more carefully than their friends, and they never ever confuse what the world should be with what the world is. This is not cynicism. This is observation. Machiavelli did not invent the behavior he described. He simply refused to pretend it did not exist. Here is what made The Prince so dangerous, and why it is still dangerous today. Machiavelli said that the gap between how people live and how people ought to live is so wide that anyone who ignores how people actually live in order to pursue how they ought to live will achieve nothing but their own destruction. Read that again. He is saying that idealism, pursued without realism, is not noble. It is suicidal. The leader who refuses to be cunning will be outmaneuvered by those who are. The businessman who refuses to be strategic will be bankrupt within a year. The person who trusts everyone will be betrayed by someone. This is not pessimism. This is the world as it has always been. Machiavelli understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding: that good intentions are not enough, that the road to hell is not merely paved with good intentions. It is built by people who refused to learn how power works and then were crushed by people who did. Machiavelli had a metaphor for fate that has never been improved upon. He said that fortune is like a raging river. When it floods, it destroys everything: trees, buildings, lives. Everyone runs. Everyone is helpless. But, and this is the crucial part, in the calm times before the flood, a wise person builds dams, digs channels, prepares defenses. When the river rises, they are ready. The fool waits for fortune to be kind. The wise person prepares for fortune to be cruel. This is not philosophy. This is strategy. And it applies to everything: business, relationships, war, career, health. The people who survive are not the luckiest. They are the most prepared. Machiavelli watched Florence fall because its leaders believed that goodness would protect them. It did not. He watched Italy be invaded by France and Spain because Italian princes believed that alliances would hold. They did not. He watched men he respected destroyed because they trusted men they should have studied. He watched good leaders fall, not because they lacked courage, but because they lacked information. Not because they were weak, but because they were blind. And he wrote it all down, not to celebrate cruelty, but to prevent the destruction that comes from naivety. Every chapter of The Prince is a lesson he learned by watching someone he knew get destroyed by their own innocence. The book is not a celebration. It is a eulogy for everyone who trusted the wrong person, believed the wrong promise, or assumed that being right would be enough to keep them alive. The Church condemned The Prince in 1559, placing it on the index of forbidden books. It remained banned for centuries. The word Machiavellian entered the language as a synonym for evil. But ask yourself, why would they ban a book about power unless the book was telling the truth about how power works? You do not ban a lie. You ban a truth that threatens the people in charge. The Church had spent 1,000 years telling rulers that God would reward virtue and punish vice. Machiavelli looked at history and said, "No, he will not. Virtue without strength is just another word for victim, and the powerful will always use your virtue against you." This was intolerable, not because it was wrong, because it was right. Every system that depends on people not understanding how it works will attack anyone who explains it clearly. Machiavelli explained it clearly, so they made his name a curse word and hoped nobody would read the book. They failed. 5 centuries later, The Prince is more relevant than it has ever been. Social media is a Machiavellian arena. The people who succeed are not the most honest. They are the most strategic. The algorithms do not reward sincerity. They reward engagement. And engagement, as Machiavelli understood, is driven by conflict, controversy, and calculated provocation. Corporate leadership follows The Prince more faithfully than any management textbook. Every boardroom operates on the principles Machiavelli described: alliances of convenience, strategic displays of generosity, the careful management of reputation over reality. Politics has never stopped being Machiavellian. Every campaign, every negotiation, every speech is crafted not to tell the truth, but to achieve a result. The politicians who admit this are called cynics. The politicians who deny it are the most Machiavellian of all. Machiavelli did not create this world. He described it. And the description is as accurate now as it was in 1513. The tools have changed, from swords to algorithms, from courts to corporations, but the principles have not. Power still flows to those who understand it, and it still destroys those who pretend it does not exist. Machiavelli was not telling you to be cruel. He was telling you to stop being naive. The world is not fair. Power is not distributed to the deserving. Good people lose. Bad people win. And the only defense against this is to understand it, not to pretend it is not true. The Prince is not a book about how to be evil. It is a book about how to survive in a world where evil exists. It is a warning disguised as advice, written by a man who had been broken by the gap between what he believed and what he witnessed. Machiavelli spent his last years trying to return to politics. He never succeeded. He died in 1527, poor and forgotten, in the same exile where he had written the most influential political text in Western history. Read The Prince, not because it will make you ruthless, because it will make you literate in the language that every powerful person already speaks. Because the people who run the world have read it, and the people who are run by the world have not. The man they called a monster was trying to save you. He just told you the truth instead of what you wanted to hear. And 500 years later, we still have not forgiven him for it.